Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, I'm going to make some tongue depressor snowmen. And I made these once, maybe even a couple of years ago. It's been a bit. And for some reason, the video that one is in is just missing. And my friend Margaret wanted to make some of these, so since we weren't able to find that video, I thought I would just go ahead and do another one. These for me sold really well, so I definitely want to make plenty myself. And again, she wants to make some, and she made several last year and gave them all away, so it's time for both of us to make some more. Now, I get these tongue depressors. I'm thinking that they're 10 inches long. It's the biggest ones that I can find. And although I can use the full length of these, I want the top of the snowman to be flat. So I'm just taking some old scissors that I don't care about dulling. They're already dull, actually. And just cutting that the length that I want it. Now here's where you can customize the size of them just by cutting more or less off the top. Now these are super simple to make, but you can just keep adding them and make them as intricate as you want. You can add as much detail as you want, or you can just keep them super simple. And this is one of the ornaments that I like to use the fabric Warm and Natural on. So I just cut strips of Warm and Natural, probably about a 1/2 inch wide or somewhere around there. And then I just cover the whole thing. But before I cover it, I like to make a loop and tie a knot in the end of it and glue that to the top of the flat side. And now here I am just taking one small piece of the Warm and Natural and covering that bottom, because what that will do is it will cover that bottom well before I start wrapping it, because once you start wrapping it, the end is just a little bit harder to finish, and I don't like to see the end of the craft stick. And then after that, then I just take those strips and just keep wrapping and gluing. You don't need a whole lot of glue, you just need some glue to start with, and then you could actually wrap the whole thing before you add glue on the end, but I will occasionally add just a dot of glue here and there. Now obviously, if you're going to make more than one of these, you'll want to just go ahead and wrap all your sticks before you start the other one. It's just a lot quicker that way. And with this Warm and Natural, it comes in white with just maybe a little bit of a cream color to it. But these I have very lightly coffee stained. Now, if I wanted them grungy, obviously I would just make my coffee stronger, or I would leave the Warm and Natural in longer. But all you do is dip it in and then wring it out. And again, if you want it darker, you can leave it a little bit longer. But these are actually barely coffee stained. These are not a whole lot darker than the Warm and Natural fabric before you coffee stain it. Now, if you're having a hard time finding this, first of all, I will add a link in the description, because I've been having to get mine on Amazon. I used to always get it at Walmart, but I don't know how many times I've looked for it lately at Walmart and they just haven't had it in. It's a quilt batting is what it is, and it's almost has a fuzzy look to it, almost like felt, but it's a little bit more pliable than felt, but it works really good for adding some, I guess, some thickness and depth to these. And some people might make these and just paint them, but I do like having the cloth look, and I do like the extra bulk that this adds. So I just wrap it. You can wrap it all the way to the top. You don't have to wrap it all the way to the top because we are going to add a hat to most of these. Now, if you don't want yours to have as many ridges, if that makes sense, as mine does, by cutting your fabric this thin, then you can always cut it thicker. This is something that wraps pretty easily regardless of the thickness of your fabric. So for the hat on this one, I'm just using this ribbon, and it is a thicker, more rustic looking ribbon. You probably wouldn't want to use a satin ribbon here. And I have even found ribbon that is the right thickness and texture that I wanted on my hat, but maybe it wasn't the right color. And in that case, I used it anyway and just painted it. So when I got this, I made sure to get it black so that I didn't have to paint it. So I'm just going to glue that strip around there. And then on the top, I'll just add a little bead of glue down the seam of the top and just kind of squish that together to close the top of the hat off. Now, before I add the brim of the hat, I'm going to show you what I did on this first one to make the face. And because I'm going to be painting the face on these, and I'll be painting just a simple little snowman face on these. But because of this warm and natural fabric, it makes it very difficult to paint on it because you get that fuzziness from the fabric. So for this first one, I just took a piece of one layer of a napkin that is not printed on. Now you could also use tissue wrap for this. But the first time that I made these and I had trouble painting them, I just decided I would try this. And I just used some Mod Podge and Mod Podged that right on to where I want to do my face, which is just under that hat. Even though I'm going to be adding a brim to it, obviously it's not going to cover this part. So I'm going to add this, and what this will do is it will cover that fabric without hiding it. And then that will make it much easier once this dries to paint on it. What I learned, though, after I did this one, I decided that maybe I didn't even need the paper on here, that I could probably just use the Mod Podge and brush it over the top of it and let that dry and then paint over that. And that was what I was able to do with the rest of them. Although I will say that the paper does tame it down just a little bit more. So if you want it smoother even, then use the paper. But I was able to make it work with just the glue. But now I need to let this dry before I paint on it. And to make the brim of the hat, what I did was I just cut a long, narrow oval shape. And I just kind of eyeballed it and made it a little bit longer than this is wide, and then cut a slit in the center and slip that right over the top. Then I just added a little bead of hot glue underneath, and here I am trimming that brim where I feel like it needs it. Now, another thing that would work really well for this, and if I had some, I would have used just regular black felt. I think black felt will work perfectly fine for this. And for the top of the hat, you can just cut a strip the width that you need, and then use it for the rim also, or for the brim also. But again, I didn't have that, and I did have this ribbon, so I'm just making this work instead. As you can see, it was a very simple and very quick way to make a little hat for these. Now, for most of these, I painted the face on, but I think this one was the only one that I used a Sharpie marker to do the eyes and the mouth with. Now again, these are going to be ornaments, but these could be used also in some sort of an arrangement, so that you needed something sticking out of the top. Or I think they would make cute little stocking stuffers to dress a stocking up, or to dress a package. You could slip one of these down into the ribbon and dress it up that way. I think that there's a lot of uses for these. Now obviously you need a very small brush for this, but you want some sort of orange for the nose. And I love the color terracotta because it's a very muted orange, and I just think it looks really good on the snowman nose. And then I like to take just a touch of white and put a little twinkle in his eyes, and a little bit of a highlight on top of the nose. And then I tore a little strip of fabric that is printed on both sides, and I guess this is probably about 6 inches long maybe, and then wrap that around the neck for the scarf. I then glued a few buttons down the front of the snowman. And I have several buttons, but the hardest buttons that I have, or the buttons that I have the hardest time finding, are smaller buttons. As you can see, this is an older button here that still has some of the thread in it, and I just love it when I find one of those because I feel like it just adds a little bit more of a shabby look to them. But obviously I wasn't able to put that on all of them. And I try to always have some coffee-stained tea towel on hand, and I get my tea towels usually at the Dollar General. You can get them by the pack, or you can get them at Walmart. But then I just dip these in coffee and wring them out to dry, and then you get this kind of grungy look. So I'm ripping a very thin piece of this and gluing it around the top of the hat. And because I'm going to be adding some embellishment to the front of the hat, I always like to put my seam in the front, so that I would start there on the side of the front gluing, and then that's where it would meet, and that's all going to be hidden by an embellishment on the side of the front. This is one of those projects that I love because it uses up scraps, and when you're working with fabric, you can save just about anything because it can be used on small projects like this. And the same thing goes for greenery. As you can see, the tiniest bits of greenery can be used here. Also, the tiniest pieces of berries and things like that. Just any kind of tiny embellishment that you want to use on this. And it just, every little bit you add just adds even more character to your ornament. Now, I didn't on any of mine today add snow, but you could definitely do that. You could either dab some white paint across the top of your hat and around the brim of your hat, or you could even add some textured paint, or you could add some joint compound. Again, I didn't do that to either of mine, but you could definitely do that. You could even sprinkle it with some iridescent glitter. Now, if you don't have or can't find these large tongue depressors, I think we all have these little transfer sticks, because every time you get transfers, it comes with another stick. And I just kind of put those aside so that I have extras of those. But I was thinking today, why not use those for these little snowmen? and it just makes a little smaller one, but it looks essentially the same. And so I decided to do some of these as well. And I'm doing them the same way. I'm just covering that end and then covering the whole stick. Now with these, obviously, you're not going to need to cut these down because they're going to work well just the length that they are. And it doesn't matter what kind you have. I've even gotten some of the plastic ones, and those would work just as well. And once you get this covered, just like with the other one, you're just going to start adding your other elements to it. And again, it's the exact same process, just on a little smaller scale. Now, after I had several wrapped, then I started to add the faces, and this is where I decided to, instead of adding the paper to the face, to just use Mod Podge. Now, I wouldn't stress about making these little hats perfect because I think that as long as you don't have any of the white showing through underneath, just the imperfection of them just adds to the character, I think. Again, you don't want this white showing through the top. And on this is one of them that I actually forgot to add a hanger to. And I did that on a few of these. And in that case, they can be used as a filler to go in a stocking or something like that. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier. Or you could still add a hanger to the back of this. But I'm just kind of reminding you how to make these. I'm not going to keep showing you the hats made except when I make them out of a different material. And one of the good things about these is you can make them in different styles. I'm going to be making some that are primitive, some that are just regular, and some that are shabby chic. And this one, I want to make it look a little bit more farmhouse style. So I'm using the jute ribbon here, and this is the jute ribbon that I get at the Dollar Tree, and just gluing that around the front. Again, I'm making my seam there on the front side so that I can add my embellishment to hide that. And as I'm looking at this one, I'm imagining, I guess because that brim is kind of turned up there on the side, I'm imagining a little cowboy, which I've never seen, a cowboy snowman, but you could tie a bandana around him. You would just have to do extra touches to make sure that it was obvious that he was a snowman. And I guess in that case, I would probably add some snow to the hat of it. But I was just imagining this with a little bandana, and I think that would be cute. But again, I want to make this one look more country, more farmhouse. So I'm just using this black and white gingham fabric. Again, the fabric that you use, I think it's kind of important on this one that it is printed on both sides. Now, I know I mentioned that it's hard to find buttons the right size. Those would be more shirt buttons, and I guess when you're getting rid of clothing and it's maybe not in good enough shape to give to someone, then you could take the buttons off it, or if it's something that you feel like someone wouldn't want, then it's worth the extra time actually to cut those little shirt buttons off. And then I'm just going to add some greenery and a tiny, tiny pine cone to this one. And even with that tiny pine cone that I will add in the description, I got those on Amazon, but I still had to take some wire cutters and cut it in half so that it wasn't too large. And although this face is a super, super simple face to paint, I want to zoom it in here to show you guys exactly how I did it. So I just started with a little glob of paint, and again, this is the color terracotta. That's just the color that works better for me. But you can use an orange, and if you don't have a muted orange, you can just mix a little bit of brown with it. But I just kind of drug that little glob out into a point to make the nose, and then for the eyes and the mouth, it's just dots. So I'm just going to take some black paint and make dots. And then once I get all the little black dots added, then I'm going to take a brush with just a dab of white on it, and I'm going to add little twinkles to the eyes and a highlight over the top of the nose. Now obviously you can do these faces however you want. I just find that doing them this way on such a small face is just easier. But you could also use a very fine paintbrush and just draw the mouth on. Now I decided on the next one to make him look more primitive, or I guess more grungy. And so when I made the hat on the next one, I purposely used my scissors and just kind of tried to fray the edges some on the hat before I made it. And as you can see, that gave him a little more rustic look. And then I took a little foam brush and some distress ink and really grunged him up, since again, when I did my coffee staining, it wasn't very heavy coffee staining. So I went over the front and the back until I was happy with the amount of grunge it had. And then for this little section around the hat, I decided to use some coffee stained cheesecloth. Actually, I'm not even sure this is coffee stained. You can buy it this color, and I'm just using some of this color of cheesecloth. And as you can see, it's not perfect at all. You don't want it to be, or I don't want it to be. And I just glued that around the center. And then I just glued on my embellishments. And the strip of gingham that I used here was, I felt like had a little bit more of a primitive look. And so I just added that on. And I decided that I'm really liking the size of these done with the transfer sticks. And before I added the buttons to these, I just cut a little tiny piece of cheesecloth and just glued it down. And as you can see, I've wadded that up there. I don't want it to be flat. I want it to be wadded up enough to where it's substantial looking. And you just put your glue down and I'm using a low temp glue gun here, and then I just kind of pinch that on and add my button. You don't want perfection here. You don't want to take your time and make it look just so, or it's just not what I want here. And you just kind of just throw it on there more or less, and then glue your button over the top. Now you could make your buttons go further down if you like that look. For me, there's just something about snowmen that I want 3 buttons on them. I'm not sure why that is, but as you can see there, that cheesecloth just really adds to this look. Again, this one doesn't have a hanger on it just yet, so either I'll have to add one or use it in another way besides as an ornament. Now I wanted to make the next one have more of a shabby chic look to it, so I wanted it to be female, and instead of trying to put a hat on it, I'm just adding a shabby bow to one side of the top. Now I will say that although this one turned out cute, it was probably my least favorite, and I guess maybe because it looked less like a snowman, and maybe because it had it didn't have enough color, and that's odd for me to say since I usually try to avoid color. Now I'm using a softer fabric for the scarf on this one. Now before I added the buttons on this one, I wanted to put some fabric underneath them also. So I just cut out some little pieces of lace and just kind of scrunched them underneath the buttons on this one. Now, if you guys decide to make the little female or the little shabby chic one, then maybe you could just add a little more contrast. I guess because the body is already light and I'm adding all these light colors, I just wasn't the happiest with this one. And as I'm looking at it here, I'm thinking that it might benefit from adding, maybe taking that shabby bow off the top and adding something with some Christmas greenery on it. Now, when I did the face on this one, I did the dots for the eyes. I wanted to add some eyelashes, but it's just too hard with this fabric to add eyelashes on. So I did the eyes the same, and I just drew on a very small mouth, and I did my nose the same. But I took a very small brush and brushed on some red ink for the cheeks, or some pink ink. And here are the changes that I made to it. And this is another one of the little transfer sticks, and I just took a piece of gingham and added around the neck of this one, similar to some of the other ones, but I just really am liking the size of these. And I just thought that I would do them on here to give you guys some other options in case you didn't have them, but I'm almost thinking I like these more. And I decided here to add some contrast behind those buttons to put some of that gingham fabric behind them. And again, I didn't worry about how I cut them out. They're very scrappy looking, I guess, and they're just kind of wadded up on there. And as you can see, it adds just enough. It looks at first like it's going to be too much contrast until you put that button on there, and it just really makes those buttons pop. Now on the next one, I decided instead of using the ribbon for the hat, that I would just tear a strip of fabric for it. And I purposely left the top a little rough so that it had more of a rustic look to it. So I just wrapped that around. Again, I just tore it the thickness that I wanted and added it the same way I did the ribbon. And of course, I added the brim also the same way. As you can see, you can make these out of most anything. And I'm thinking that you don't really have to use the warm and natural fabric for the body of this. You could just use anything that that was a little more substantial. You want a little bit of thickness here. But I just think with the warm and natural, if you can find it, it works better because it has kind of a stretchiness to it and it just covers a lot better. Now because this one has more of a shabby look to it, then I'm using that cheesecloth around the hat here. Also tried to use more rustic embellishments for the hat on this one, and I'm using that cheesecloth also as the scarf. And I used still more of that cheesecloth back behind the buttons. I also decided to use fabric for the next hat. And instead of using the traditional black on it, I decided to do it in red and white. I love these ornaments mostly because anyone can do them. And not only can anyone do them, but anyone can do them and make them look professional. Now, I know that I'll have people ask what I charge for these, and I think last year I charged $5 for them. Now, you may get more in your area and likely you will. Tennessee, especially in Knoxville, Tennessee, to me, $5 is about what I can get for them. I don't have any problem selling them for that, but I don't think I could get much more. Now I'm trying to make this one look more female, so I'm just taking a piece of lace and going around this hat. And I'm taking a more girly piece of fabric to use for the scarf on this one too. And I think this is just one that I cut from an old scarf, or maybe even an old doily that was torn. And again, here I'm putting a little bit of lace behind the buttons. And here again are some of the snowmen that I worked on today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.